I I I got a little startled by the window. There you go. I did not play soccer as a kid, other than just with my family, my brothers and my cousins when we all got together. But I've always loved soccer. My team, my favorite team ever is Rosario Central from my hometown. And we always say you're born into the team. I had no choice. My dad, my grandfather, and my grandfather before him, they were all Rosario Central fans. So that's where I was born. I was also born right right before the first World Cup that Argentina won. So I always grew up hearing stories of those celebrations at the end of the 70s. My other passion is books. Even before I became a writer, I have always been a reader, and I read everything from poetry to horror and suspense and romance and YA. I love to read everything. I love stories. And so finally, when I decided that I wanted to become an author, I meshed all my passions, and I thought, why not write about a girl who plays soccer in Rosario and turn that stereotype a little upside down? And that's how Furia was born. You see me now wearing my Juventus jersey just because I really like the orange, and also Juventus went back to practice today. That's one of my favorite European teams. I am a little biased, and I have been following them more since Dybala joined them 6 years ago. And that's me. Besides being an author, I'm also a mom. I have kids your age. I don't know, I'm not sure how old you are, but I have 4 teenagers at home and a little 9-year-old. And so when I'm not writing, you can find me at a soccer pitch, cheering for my kids. My boys still play, or for my daughters who are cheerleaders. So that's me.
The questions over.
Cody and Matt, do you want to explain to Yami a little bit about our team?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, first of all, my name is Cody. I'm one of the coaches for this team, along with Matt, Coach Matt, who you can see on here. And we just want to say thank you so much for joining us. The book was incredible. It was incredible to read the book along with this team. It was so cool to read a book about a female soccer player with a team of all boys and learn about what it is like from a different perspective, obviously, playing as a young woman growing up. I think these boys learned a ton just through reading this book, and now have a new perspective on ways that they might be able to not only encourage girls to play, but bring them into our games and make them feel more supported and included in maybe trying something new or following a passion they already have. So it's been awesome. This is Oakland Genesis. So these boys all live in Oakland. We're from California, which is where I grew up. This is where I started playing the game since I was 5 years old. A little bit about me is I'm a dual citizen, so I have Italian citizenship and American citizenship, and my favorite team is also Juve in Italy. So that was great to see that. Obviously, you had a great Copa America, and I had a great Euro championship, so we're both happy right now.
We were cheering for Italy here. My great grandparents immigrated from Italy to Argentina, so you know we had to go with the land of our ancestors.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a happy day for you. First
That's
Argentina wins and Italy wins, man. The day of life.
Couldn't ask for more.
Yeah. And then a little bit about this team. So obviously soccer in the United States, I think growing up in the system, playing all the way through college and even a little bit professionally after, it's very exclusive, and oftentimes it's not decided as much on your passion and your talent, but how much you might want to pay to play. So we try to do something different where we offer a program that doesn't cost money, but it does require a standard of academic effort. So if you want to play on the team, you just have to commit to working hard in school, which is something all of these players have done. And we're really proud of the progress that they're making through the pandemic and into playing our first season. We're going to start our first seasons officially this fall, which is really exciting. The boys have been practicing really hard, but also obviously studying hard too, which is the result of something like this, them committing to reading a book even when they're not in school this summer. So that's my take on it. Matt, if you want to add anything, please hop in.
No, that was amazing. So much appreciation for you, Yamile, and for you, Carina, for leading this exercise. It's been really exciting to watch the kids engage with the book and ask some thoughtful questions. I am only an American citizen, and I'm looking forward to celebrating with an American good performance soon. I don't think winning it all is in the cards in the near future, but hopefully soon.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, thank you so much. The boys have prepared a lot of questions for you, so I'll turn it over to Carina to kind of organize.
And so, Yamile, I'm Carina. I am a teacher at one of the schools that this team is. Some of the boys come from. I'm also Alexander's mother. Alexander might be pretty familiar to you. He has come to a lot of your events because he loves Furia.
Hello.
Hey.
Very excited. I was very excited to read it with the boys. I was just telling them, like, I never thought when I became a teacher that I would ever have a chance to read a book about a female soccer player. I played growing up and I hid it from my dad for years. And so it just was like having these conversations with these boys about how to be better allies and how to support women in sports. It just felt so powerful. So I thank you for writing a book that allowed us to have these moments. So boys, do you want to go ahead and start with questions?
If you do, how about we have you say, I'd like to go in the chat, and then we can call on you, and you have the option of, ideally, let's see if we can ask it out loud. But if not, if you prefer to type it in the chat, that's okay. But let's see if we can ask these out loud, boys. All right, Alex, I'll let you kick it off.
Okay, so my question, this is just first thing. So with the Olympics coming up, I need something to keep me awake since they are in Japan. And since you are from Argentina, I would like to know what's the best. Is there mate in the U.S. and what is the best brand?
Oh my goodness! I'm so glad that you kicked off with this question because I have my mate ready. I always try to keep it at hand for this event so that people who might not be familiar with it will see what I mean when you read about mate. So mate can be the name of the drink. The herb is called yerba mate, or the container too. And now I prepared it, but I haven't harvested yet. So I put the dry herb, I put my bombilla, which is like a filtered straw, and then I have my thermos with hot water. So the water doesn't have to be boiling because otherwise you'll burn your mouth, even if you've drank mate since you were a baby like me. So it has to be hot, like for a hot tea, but not super boiling. And I find yerba mate, I'm super lucky because there's a Peruvian store about 25 minutes away from my house. And so I get it from them. But lately I've been buying online. And now when I first moved to Utah, I had to travel about an hour to a Latin market to find yerba. But I think in California, you might find it at any Latin store or even health store, because lately there's been like a resurgence of mate as an energy drink. So I find it even here in our little grocery store.
Yerba mate?
Yes, and the brands that you will find are Guayaki. I love one from Argentina that's called Verde Flor, that I only discovered it when I went there last time in December 2019. And that's what my brother was drinking. And I loved it because it's mixed with mint and other herbs from the Argentine sierras. But I also like just the plain old yerba mate. And I know the brand that Leo Messi and a lot of the players drink is Canarias. And I think it's a Brazilian yerba, and I haven't tried it, but when I ordered online last time, I got 1 kilo packet just to try. So once the Verde Flor runs out, I'm gonna try Canarias and report on what it's like. So a lot of people say that mate gives you energy. That's why they sell it at the at the health store, or they also sell it like in a can, kind of like a Red Bull, but a little healthier, I guess. That's what my older kids drink that. I don't remember the brand, but I think it's the Guayaquil brand also. It's like a can of soda and it's yerba mate with other flavors. I don't like cold mate, so I never drink from a can. I just drink, even if it's 105 degrees, like it was here last weekend, I will drink my hot mate. I'm a purist that way. And now I drink it because it's a habit. A lot of people call it the drink of friendship. It's nice to be drinking mate with your friends. You talk about life, you talk about the game. Like I couldn't drink it when I was watching the game, but in halftime, you make your mate. But a lot of people also say that it gives them so much energy, it keeps them awake. So Alex, mate might be a good alternative to other things like coffee or that are not that healthy at your age.
Okay. Thank you so much. I even bookmarked where to buy it so you can buy it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we have a lot of players on the team who are big fans of Messi, but then also are big fans of Coca-Cola. So we're constantly trying to tell them that there's no chance that Messi would drink Coca-Cola, and he definitely would prefer mate to Coca-Cola. So
He's
Freddie,
always
absolutely.
mate.
that should be your new drink, Freddie, if Freddie's on here.
Freddie's addicted to Coca-Cola, but now he can drink mate easy.
Well, in spite of the rivalry between Cristiano and Messi, of course, I admire Cristiano. He's the machine and he does not drink soda. And that's why he became the machine that he is. So kids.
Finally, someone who just lets them both be amazing and not just have to fight over both of them.
No, how lucky are we that we get to see them play at the same time?
Yes.
Sometimes, you would get a player like this once in a generation. Now we have them both. And when they used to both be in La Liga, that was always so much fun. I just love to see them play.
And I think we have a second generation coming in with Mbappe and Haaland as well.
I know. Those two are so much fun to watch.
Awesome.
Hold up. I'm just saying this. Both of them are GOATs, but it's your personal opinion which one is better.
Yeah, lots of personal opinions.
All right. Well, then I think we have another question. I think, Angel, you're going to be up next.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is, what inspired you to make Furia?
Well, I was inspired by several things. One of them was that I have always loved soccer so much, but not being able to play. There's a saying that sometimes those who can't play can become referees. As a girl, I couldn't even become a referee because, I had never seen a woman be a referee when I was growing up. And so the next best thing was to make up my own little alternate reality or virtual reality in a story. When I started writing Furia, I hadn't been back home in Argentina for 7 years, and I was super, super homesick. So writing Furia was my way to go back home. When my children were very young, when I started writing Furia, and I would put them in bed like at 8 or 9 in the evening, in the summer, I remember. And then I would go into the Rosario that I had in my mind and create this character and her world and all the obstacles that she had to face. And then every time, although I have lived away from Argentina for a long time, my siblings live there, all my nieces and nephews, my big family. So I'm still very connected. I read the news every day and I drink mate every day. So I was very aware of all the things happening in our society. So when women's soccer became more popular and finally became a professional sport, that was another little piece of the puzzle that I could put in Furia and make the path for my character a little easier to achieve her goal. And then when the New Menos movement started in 2014, although a lot of people don't see the connection between feminism and women's soccer, there's actually a very firm intersection, because if it hadn't been for the work of the earlier feminists in Argentina, women today would not be allowed to play the sport that we all love. So I added all those little pieces of examples that I saw. So Diego is based on 3 boys from my barrio that grew up to play professionally, and they were everybody's heroes. My brother played here in the United States in college. He didn't make it professionally, and he was and when he went back to Argentina, he always said, oh, I wish I had that opportunity. So of all the people that I met in my life that had the same dream, I only met 3 boys from my neighborhood that actually achieved it. And so I put all these pieces together to create the characters. Sometimes things that I saw as a young girl that stayed with me forever, like going to the stadium when the game is over and seeing all the players there together and they look like rock stars, or just the scenes of the even those 3 the guys that made it professionally playing in the vacant lot in the neighborhood, like they were little boys still, you know, with the kids from the neighborhood. Those things stayed forever with me, and so I was able to grab still a little from the things that I saw and put it together in the story. And although Furia is completely a work of fiction, it's not based in my life, there are a lot of things that I had in common with Camila. I too went to an all-girls school. And sometimes when you talk about private schools in the States, a lot of people think of very, you know, rich families. But the situation is different in Latin America. It was a private school where only girls attended, but they were all working class families. And although I didn't have a team, I always consider these friends that I met in 3rd grade all the way until 12th grade. They were my teammates and we're still friends to this day. And then, for example, the place El Buen Pastor, the Good Shepherd, where Camila teaches English, that's based in a real place that used to be a jail for disobedient women and disobedient daughters. And like in the book, it's true that the community reclaimed that space to make it into a refuge for learning for people who are trying to overcome homelessness or addictions, and a place in the community where children can gather and learn and have a space. So it was a little easy to, every time I thought about Argentina and Rosario specifically, it was easy to go back to these places because I had so much material to work with. The hard part was to know what to include in Furia and what to leave out for perhaps another work in the future.
That's a great answer. Any follow-ups on that, boys?
So the church is a real place?
It is a real place, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool.
It is.
So it's kind of like, so your book has like real places, but with like fake characters?
Yes. And so what I set out to do when I wrote Furia was, it was a little hard because Rosario can be a hard place to live in, especially Camila's neighborhood, which is the neighborhood where I grew up. That 7 de Septiembre is a real place. It's a government housing, and you find everything. You have a lot of people who follow a life of crime, and other people who are just working families who want to give their children a better future. And so, but I didn't want to show that Argentina and Rosario were these places filled with crime and violence and all negative things. And on the other hand, I didn't want to pretend that these things didn't happen. So it was a very fine line to walk and strike that balance, showing the beautiful things that I loved about Rosario and that I missed so much with the other things that made Camila's life so hard. And so, yes, I wanted to write a book that when people read it, they could see the places in their mind and that they wanted to go visit someday. That's what I like to read. You know, when I'm reading my favorite stories, my one book that I go back to time and again is called The Shadow of the Wind, and it's based in Barcelona. And I had never been to Barcelona when I read that book. I must have read it like 10 times. The author was a Spanish author, Carlos Ruiz Zafón, and he lived in California for a long time. And kind of like me with Furia, he wrote about Barcelona when he was away from it because he missed it so much. And so when I read this book, I saw the places in my mind. And then years later, I had the opportunity to go to Barcelona, and I would tell my husband where everything was, and he would look at me like, how do you know? When have you been here before? But it was all because of the book. And I kind of wanted to do that with Rosario, that when people read Furia, and perhaps if they had the opportunity to go to Rosario one day, they would recognize all these landmarks, like the monument to the flag and the river is a very real place, and the stadium and the other places that where the story takes place. I wanted them to be very, very vivid in the reader's mind.
Awesome. All right, I think the next question we have is going to be from Ivan.
Yeah. I think Angel took my idea, but I want to ask you, at some point, do you ever feel like quitting, and why?
Say that again, repeat the question.
Like, at some point in life, do you ever quit at like writing, or never?
Every day, sometimes. Sometimes I think last year was a hard year, although so many amazing things happened with Furia. I had been waiting for the release of this book pretty much all of my adult life. And then, of course, it came out during 2020 when there were no events in person. Everything was canceled. Nobody knew what would happen with the world. Everybody was just trying to deal with the grief of so many lives lost and the uncertainty that I had never been through a pandemic before. So to have this book of my heart come out during this difficult time made me think about so many things, my relationship with art, why I had written this book. And ultimately, I had to come to terms with the fact that I had poured all my heart and soul into telling the best story that I could, send it out into the world, and then just hope for the best. And for example, this meeting that we're having right now is a dream come true, because when people would ask me, who do you envision your readers to be? I always say, of course, girls, but I would want men and boys to read this book too. And especially you all that know what soccer means, and soccer is such a big part of your life. So in spite of all the negative things that came with 2020 and the pandemic, a lot of amazing things happened that I could have never foreseen. So sometimes when I'm struggling with the next story to tell, I'm wondering, oh my goodness, I'm putting so much of my time and my work and my effort into something that I don't know if it's going to reach an audience or if it's going to be successful. Then I have to pause and think about all these amazing opportunities I have had to hear how Furia resonated with people or my other books. So sometimes when I feel like, oh, I don't even remember how to write a story and I feel like giving up, I take a step back and remember to go back to my real life so that I can feel my creative well, to go back to the computer when writing is a very lonely endeavor. And so when I'm by myself, I try to pull from all those feelings, and my definition of success has changed through the years. At first, the success was finishing a manuscript, then trying to find an agent for it, and then a publishing house, and then send it out into the world. And now I know that Furia succeeded because it resonated with readers like you, maybe people who have nothing in common with my character, but who found something to connect with in the story. So yes, it's hard. And like I always say, the hardest part is to open the document or the computer and start working again. And nothing that is worth it is ever easy. So when I'm struggling a lot, I remember why I do this. I do it because, my dream was always to be a writer. And now that I get to do this, I don't want to let the little girl that I was down, because this was my dream all my life. And now I have what I always wanted. And so I want to do the best that I can with all the opportunities that I was given.
Thank you for that. That's so inspiring. And we're all very inspired by the book, but I think your story is inspiring as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Who is next? Coach,
I think Nelson is next.
Nelson?
Next. Yep.
Nelson and then me. Nelson asked, will there be a second book? He'd put in the chat.
Sometimes people ask me that, and Camila and Diego specifically, they were the two characters that were always in my mind since the very, very beginning. Nothing changed about them. Their relationship was always the same. They lived in my mind and my heart for a long chunk of my life. So it's hard to let them go. So now with the Copa America or the Olympics coming up, I think, what would they do if they had this opportunity? So I always fantasize in my mind, now that Camila is also a professional player, how would their relationship go? What would they still, have that connection? So my second YA that I wrote for my publisher is set in Rosario, but not with Camila and Diego, and not with soccer as the main team, although there's always a soccer thread in my stories. In anything that I write about, there's always something about soccer. But it's not the continuation of Furia, because sometimes I think stories need to marinate a little bit. Furia took me a long time to write, and I hope that a second part will not take me all the same amount of years, more than 10 years, but I still don't have a clear narrative if there were to be a second part. But like I said, I always play with them in my mind, and I imagine how they would be celebrating, what they would be doing, what their obstacles would be, what their new dreams would be too. And so I never say never. And hopefully one day in the future, I'll be able to go back to them and explore these characters a little more.
That's great. Askari, do you want to try to ask your question? Okay, you're going to type it in the chat. That's fine.
That's awesome. I think one of the amazing things that came with the pandemic is that I had never done a virtual event before. It had always been in person, and there's, I love meeting people face to face, but technology gives us the opportunity to get together even if we are far away, and it's been a blessing. What are the things you would recommend in Argentina? Okay, Argentina is such a big country, and it has so much culture, a lot of about doing, and there's a ton of things to do. I am super sad though that when I left Argentina, I was still a teenager and I didn't have the chance to know my country and all that it had to offer. And every time I go back, I go and visit my family, and because of my kids' school, there's not a ton of time to explore. But one of my dreams is to visit my country from top to bottom. And Argentina is such a big country that you can find every climate and weather. We're very close to Antarctica, so winters are very cold, but we also have beautiful landscapes because of that. Patagonia is one of the places that I would love to go. You can do pretty much anything in Patagonia. You can go skiing, you can go watch whales. This time of the year is actually the time for when people go and see the whales in the coast. A lot of people go fly fishing there. In Rosario is a very industrial city, but it became more and more touristic as the years went by. And so when I go to Rosario, I love to go and see gaucho shows. You can see actual gauchos, which are the Latin American cowboys, and they do their shows and their dances and have an asado. My siblings live in Mendoza, which is kind of like Napa Valley. It's the wine country in Argentina. So I visited the wineries, and we have the Andes, which are the highest peaks in the Western Hemisphere. So I live in Utah, and we have mountains here. But when I went to Mendoza for the first time and I saw the Andes that are 3 times as high as the Rocky Mountains, I was speechless. Beautiful country. We have the Iguazu Falls, which people say are the 8th or the 7th, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, because they're so beautiful. And we share the Iguazu Falls with our neighborly country, Brazil. And you can see the falls from both sides of the border. Again, I've never seen them. I never had the opportunity to be a tourist in my country, but as soon as it's okay to travel again, I have all these places in my bucket list. We have what they call esteros. Esteros are kind of like the swamplands in California, in Florida and Tennessee, and that you have caimans and a lot of flora and fauna. So Argentina is a very rich country in terms of natural resources and beauty. And then, of course, you have the big cities like Buenos Aires. I love Buenos Aires. And the thing that I love the most about Buenos Aires is all the libraries and bookstores that you can find everywhere. One of my favorite places in the whole wide world is called the Ateneo bookstore. And it used to be a theater. So it has all these beautiful frescoes painted on the ceilings and the walls. And it's just a bookstore. You can go get a book or a comic and drink a coffee or a soda with your friends. And every time I go to Buenos Aires, I try to make a point of going there. And then there's also the super famous cemetery, Chacarita, where a lot of really famous people are. And so that can be a little, I'm a little, I like scary things in cemeteries. So I really like the cemetery. Also because it has a huge chunk of history, and it's interesting to know about all the people that lived in Argentina and that have passed on. And also because in the cemeteries, you see a lot of works of art, sculptures, some beautiful architecture. So tons of things to see for every taste. If you like more outdoorsy things, or if you like theater or tango shows. I went to a tango show last time in Buenos Aires. I don't dance tango, contrary to the stereotype, not all Argentines dance tango. But I went to a show, which was amazing. So there are a lot of things to do. And also now, it's something that I noticed in my last trip in 2019 is that there are beautiful murals all over the city. And especially now with Copa America, I saw a new one that was done in Leo Messi's neighborhood, which is the same neighborhood where I was born. And it's called Barrio Tablada. And there's also another mural of Angel Di Maria. So one of my goals when I go back is go and get a picture with these murals in the background.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Okay,
Alex,
so
go ahead.
yeah. So can I do a little can you say like a little thing before I go to my question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this pandemic actually came at the worst time because me and my parents had so many things planned for this summer. We were gonna go to Catalina. Last summer we were gonna go to Catalina. We were gonna go to Florida. We were gonna go to Alcatraz.
Mhm.
And now I'm like, now what? So we moved our Florida trip back to the December of this year, and we're going to Catalina for my birthday, which is next month.
That's awesome.
So my question is, so I remember a part of the book when they're kind of talking about the hunt of the gays. So where did you get that part of the book from? And like, where was it? Was that part of your childhood or?
Tell me again, what part of the book?
I think it was like chapter 24, 25. After
what's happening in that part?
Where like Camila is having like a little bit of an emotional breakdown, and Roxana's hugging her, and then everyone looks at them strangely.
That's cool. Yes. So
That's cool.
And that's something that I witnessed a lot going to an all girls school. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so there were a lot of misconceptions and prejudices regarding people dating somebody from the same gender. And same-sex marriage was legalized in Argentina a long time ago, but still a lot of those misconceptions remain. And so that's what's happening there, that they're affectionate. Argentines are people that hug a ton, they kiss a ton. Even my husband's from Puerto Rico. So he's a Latino, but he hadn't had experience with a lot of Argentines at once. So when we went to Argentina the first time, my cousins, leaned in to kiss him on the cheek. Men kissed in Argentina. So he was like, whoa, until he got used to that, So I wanted to add that to show the cultural differences of what, how people express their affection in different ways, not only in the society, but even, in different circumstances. So that's something that happened a lot in women's soccer, that women would get accused, of being marimachos. Like if you were a girl and you like to play, you would be called a marimacho, that you had no femininity because you liked the sport that was historically associated with manhood, And so I wanted to bring those things to light to show that those barriers are falling. And sometimes, people say soccer is just a sport, but you can see society reflected in a team and in a sport in so many ways. So that was a good medium for me to show those things, those topics that I think about all the time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Gerald, you said you had a question?
Where do you get your ideas, and what advice will you give to writers? Oh my goodness. When I first wanted to become a writer, my problem was that I said I had no ideas. And when I sat down to write, I would just copy from my favorite books. That's what I did when I was young. So if, I saw a show that I loved, I would kind of copy that plot line, but I was worried that I had no original ideas until Camila came to my mind. And then I have now the opposite problem. I have so many ideas all the time that I have no business writing because I'm so busy. But what I do when that happens is I have a little recipe box with index cards. And sometimes I'll read a funny headline or an interesting headline, or hear something on the radio, or my kids and their friends will say something funny. Like I remember when my kids were little, my son was in 6th grade. We moved to a new house and a friend said, oh, I don't play. He was going into 7th grade, my son. And the new neighbor said, I don't play with sevies, meaning 7th graders. And it was such a unique and random thing that it stayed in my mind. And I actually included that in my book on these magic shores that also came out last year. So sometimes, a little seed of an idea will have wings and roots for a whole novel. Other times it's just a little line in a book. The other day I saw a poster for the new Disney movie Encanto that's going to be set in Colombia. And the idea that I got has nothing to do with Colombia, but I had seen a capybara. Like Disney movies, there always has to be a little pet, magical pet that talks and sings. So there is a capybara in this movie. And I had an idea that had nothing to do with Colombia or Disney, but with the river, because it reminded me, the capybara. Brains make like funny associations sometimes. And I was excited and I wrote it down and put it in my recipe box. And sometimes ideas come when I'm driving around or when I'm running or riding my bike. When my mind is not actively seeking for an idea, I will think, sometimes I'm like, what if, or what would happen if I changed this or that? What if there were, Latino people in space? What kind of music would they listen to? And that the brain keeps going kind of like a snowball. And then sometimes it comes to form a full story, and other times I'm just entertaining myself. So that's something that I've done a lot since I was a little girl, telling myself stories, even if I don't write them down. And for new writers, I would say to go ahead and write the stories that come to your mind, even if you think they're not original. So sometimes people, when they hear about Furia, say, oh, that sounds a lot like Bend It Like Beckham. And if you have seen the movie Bend It Like Beckham, there are similarities, but also it's so different from Furia. So if I had been afraid of not following, the story that I had in my mind, Furia would have never happened. And so I'm glad that I didn't hear those doubts in my mind. And because even if you give everybody the same assignment, like write about a bunny that is trying to cross the street, I assure you that all of you would come up with completely different stories. Some would be funny, some would be horror, some would be romantic, some would be graphic stories, because we're all different and we all bring our own little flavor into the idea. And so, like I said, the stories come from all over the place. You just have to say yes and put them away. And if they persist and I see that they have the potential to become a story, I will use them. And if not, like I said, I save them. Like you know, you don't make a meal all with salt. You put a little sprinkles of salt in a story. So that's how these snippets that come to my mind are. I see them like spices. Oh, they can go in a dialogue, or they can, you know, go in a description. And so I use everything that comes to my mind. And sometimes I have to think actively. If I'm stuck and none of the ideas that I have in my recipe box are helping me, I try to go through different scenarios. And sometimes I go ahead and write a scene. Like, for example, I'm trying to explore what it's like to write in the present tense. And if it doesn't feel natural, I'll go and change it to third person. So experimenting, it's like practice. You practice, you try and see what you're more comfortable with until you find the way that is uniquely yours.
Also, I heard from an unknown source that you have a Peloton.
I have a Peloton, yes.
The unknown source is my unknown source is always my mom. So whenever I say that, it's always
I'm
my
shocked.
Are you gonna drop your Peloton tag in the chat, Alex?
Maybe.
Yes, I
That's
dropped
great.
mine. I'm sun in my pocket, and I'm grateful that I had my Peloton before the pandemic, so I could still do things and be active.
Yeah.
That was how it saved us. We both were on it constantly.
Yes.
Angel, did you have another?
But as things came back, I kind of stopped using it. But I'm probably gonna go back to using it just because it feels better.
Angel, did you have a question?
What was the most challenging thing about making books?
The most challenging thing is to keep going when you have a lot of rejection sometimes. Because when I started writing Furia, I didn't know other writers in my area. Then I found eventually a writer's group, but I was the only Latina. And so a lot of the things that I was trying to do, some people hadn't seen them in a book before, and they were like, oh, I don't think you can mix English and Spanish. I don't think anybody would care about a girl in this very distinctive neighborhood. It's a very niche idea. And you know, sometimes I would go with that advice, but then discover that it wasn't the story that I was setting out to do. So I'd go back to my original gut feeling. Eventually, when I started learning more about the craft of writing and I started sending my manuscript to editors and agents, I would get a lot of compliments on the writing, but I would get told, oh, there's no room for this book in the market, or, you know, sports books don't sell, or things like that. And I feel like the market has changed a ton. And then Furia came out in 2020 when, in spite of the pandemic, was the perfect year for it to come out, because a lot of people, because of the success of the women's national team, care more about soccer, and the Me Too movement kind of shone a light into the Ni Una Menos movement. So there were more opportunities. But being told no many, many times can be very discouraging. It's when you're trying to score and you keep hitting the post, or you're offside, so the goal doesn't count. So many times I was so close to a yes, and then it would be a no, that it was very easy to be discouraged and have those thoughts, like with the previous question, of giving up. So I always remember a phrase that I read in high school. It's a Shakespeare phrase: to thine own self be true. And so a lot of times trying to get into the market, I would think, oh, what if I just wrote a story like all the other stories that are in the market? Because I know I can write, but it's my stories that are not resonating with the editors. And I would try to, but writing something that I hadn't put my heart in felt like I wasn't being myself. So keeping that quote in mind, to remaining true to myself, it was the reminder that I needed, so that when, you know, I was going through the hard times of having so many no's, that I wouldn't be discouraged. A lot of people think that once you're published, things are super easy, but I'm still being told no by my editor. Sometimes I'll have an idea and submit it and they still reject it. But I keep trying and I write other things, or sometimes I put the story in the back burner. Maybe now it's not the right time, but the right time will come in the future. And so those are lessons that people had told me before, but I learned them when I had to go through them to really, really learn them.
So I'm actually going to ask the next question, because in our discussions, we spend a lot of time talking about Pablo and the complexity of Pablo's character, right? Because sometimes he is Camila's biggest ally, and so there's definitely good in him. But to a lot of us, it felt like he really stopped short of being like a true ally. And so some of the conversations we had as a group were like, because this is a group of young men, how can they be allies, right? And so wanting to see your thoughts and ideas and for these young men on like, how can they continue to be allies and go that extra step that Pablo never really seemed able to go until maybe the end, where he's like, I'm gonna have a daughter, now I'm kind of scared. So yeah, that's the question.
I love this question because, again, when people, say, oh, feminism only affects, or, misogyny only affects women, that's not the case. It affects all of society. This violence that, girls and women receive, because I feel like, especially culturally in the Latino community, we see a lot of these things. Sometimes maybe not perhaps the outward violence, but not doing anything is also being part of the problem. And like you said, Carina, Pablo was sometimes an ally, but when he didn't have any benefits from stepping in, he wouldn't be Camila's ally anymore. So a big part of being an ally is to step up when you see that there's something that is happening that you don't agree with. Like if you see somebody being catcalling or saying a bad comment or saying a misogynistic word to another person, to say, oh, I'm not comfortable with that, or I don't agree with what you're saying, or why would you say that? And usually the people that are perpetrating these stereotypical actions, they do it out of habit, and they have never stopped to think if what they were saying or doing was wrong. And so sometimes it takes one person to call them out and say, oh, you're calling so-and-so this bad word, but why are you doing that? And until somebody has the courage and the love to step in and call them out, they don't realize. And sometimes, I don't know, when I was growing up, it was a huge thing not to go in between a fight. If it wasn't your problem, you couldn't intervene. But when you intervene, you can show somebody that you see them and that you see their struggle. If you see somebody being bullied or being verbally abused, I mean, I'm not advocating for anybody to put themselves in danger, but when you sometimes let a parent know or an authority figure know about a problem that you saw, you're not being a tattleteller. You're just helping somebody know that you saw their struggle and that you care about them. And so there are a lot of important ways in which we can be allies. One of them, again, can be to cheer on for the women's team. That's, it's easy sometimes to say, yes, we support everybody playing no matter what their gender is, but I don't see a lot of men wearing, Alex Morgan's jersey or Mert Rapinoe's jersey. And when they do, it makes a big impact because it shows the other men and boys that you can do that, and that it can inspire others to follow through. So coaches, you have a big responsibility and I admire all your work. And that's what I always say to my kids, teachers and coaches. Parents cannot teach everything. It does take a village. It takes a team. Humanity is a huge team, and we need everybody to be aligned on the same principles. And so sometimes speaking up is one way in which we become allies. And other times is, just being present for each other or recognizing the struggles that others are going through.
Alex, did you have another question? I think you said you might want to.
I want to ask one. I want to ask one.
Oh, Ivan, go ahead.
I'll let Ivan go. I'm good.
What is the best way to support women's soccer, or how to help them out to feel comfortable, like to be playing?
I love that. I love all you guys. Watch the games, cheer for them, wear their jerseys. When you're asked who, sometimes when people ask me who my favorite players are, I always say, of course, Messi, but I love Marta. I love the girls from my national soccer team and the US soccer team. Know them and talk about them and share, fun, beautiful plays that they have done in the field with your friends. Or sometimes if you see a fun goal that a woman scored, try to practice that with your team. We always tend to look at the men's to emulate, but there are amazing things happen in women's soccer, and a lot of inspiring stories that they don't sometimes, the US national team has all these support and they're multi-champions, but there are other countries or teams that don't have the financial support, or they just do it for the love of the game. Like when we saw Thailand in the last World Cup, they just do it because they love it. So learn about these women so that people will know their names, that their fight is not for nothing, that they're making a dent, that they're leaving a mark in young players. And when you see, I don't know if your club has girl players, but cheer for them when they're playing their important games, or don't be afraid to practice with them. One of my favorite things to, when I go see my son's practice, he's in the U16, and in their ODP team, there are 3 girls that practice with the boys, and these girls are so fierce and they're awesome. And I get inspired being a mom and being an outsider. And I love it when the boys talk respectfully to them too. So, one of the most important things is know them, know their names, cheer for them, and support them.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm proud of our older boys team is their ability to incorporate one of our best players, who's a girl, onto their practices consistently. And I think one of the things that they've done really well is they're not afraid to lose to a girl. And a lot of times I'll see a boy that's afraid to lose to a girl, so he won't even give her a chance by not trying. But
yes,
they will try as hard as they can because they know how good she is, but they also know that it's okay to lose to a girl, especially when she deserves it like that. So for the younger team, I just want to encourage that too. If we ever practice with girls, there's a line and balance with any new player, whether it's a girl or a boy, on how you should incorporate them into soccer. And if they've never played, then you don't want to, whether it's a girl or a boy, you don't want to kill them and make their experience poor. But if they're good and they deserve to be played against as hard as you can, then you need to give them that respect and let them beat you if they can. And
I love that. Yes, if you remember, there is a scene in which Camila's team is practicing against the boys' team, and the boys are not happy that they're losing. And at the end, one of them says, "Oh, it was a lose-lose for us, because if we won, we just won against girls. And if we lost against girls." So, that mentality has to change. You give your opponent or your rival the respect in the field by doing your best and giving them, the opportunity to practice with you. So yeah, I love that.
Alex, did you have another question?
No.
Nope.
I'm
Okay.
good right now. I've asked. I feel like I want to give other people enough time to ask their own questions, because I feel like I have asked a little too many.
That's
I love that.
Alex. Is there anybody else who has questions that you want to type or ask out loud? And I think if something comes up in a couple of days too, we have Yamile's contact. You can always let Carina or Matt know. We can always send a question too if you would like that answer. I think that would be amazing. I did have a question. I know this book was written, or at least it came out fairly recently, but written a little bit before that. So what improvements do you feel like there have been even since that book is written in women's soccer in Argentina and America? And what else do you think still needs to happen though?
Well, when I started writing Furia, women's soccer was not a professional sport in Argentina still. And so that change came when I was going through the very last rounds of edits in 2018. And so from that point to now, I feel like the improvements have been exponential, because even just a couple of years ago, I didn't know a lot of these players that weren't Alex Morgan or Meg Rapinoe. But social media has made it so that we know about them, we know where they came from, and we can cheer for them. I love seeing lately, not only for the US team, but pretty much all of the national teams, when they reveal their jersey, they have both men and women's team at the photo shoot revealing the jersey, and also the professional sports. And so I feel that's such a huge improvement to have, the two captains of the men and women's team, even if, of course, the Argentina team hasn't won like the men's, but they're also the national team without distinction of men and women. And that made me super happy when I saw it last time. And so there are still things that need to improve. Like, for example, the friendly between Argentina and the US, that when the players exchange jerseys, Meg Rapinoe commented that Yamile Fernandez, the Argentine player, had a generic jersey. It didn't have her name in the back. And she said, AFA, which is the Football Association from Argentina, and get on with it, put the players' names on the jersey. And so, see, Megan was being an ally in that case, because she has her name on her jersey, but she was advocating for somebody else whose association was not as advanced. So there are still a ways to go, but especially with them being paid what they deserve to be paid. But I'm an optimistic person, and I feel like the younger generations are growing, seeing the sport being played by men and women with the same level of excellence, that they're growing in a different way from how I grew up. So that makes me hopeful for the future.
But this just comes to show, like, Argentina didn't really care about their women's team until they cared about them a little bit when they made the World Cup, but still they don't put enough money or basically anything into the women's.
No, and something that I see a lot here in Utah, especially, we have a very huge Latino community. But although soccer, like girls soccer, is super popular in Utah, but you don't see a lot of Latina girls. And I think it's because of two reasons. It's so expensive to play, like you said at the beginning, Cody. And the other one is that we still carry, like, these families who are perhaps second, third generation Latinos, they still carry the stigma from their olden days that girls should not play. And so it's still kind of sad not to see a lot of Latina girls on the pitch. They go and watch their brothers, but they don't get the opportunity to play. And so that's something that we see in the motherlands, things are improving. I would like those same benefits to trickle down to the girls of our communities, because I see a lot of, girls from every ethnicity and nationality, but the Latinas are still not given the opportunity to play here in the States.
Yeah, like as a coach, I coach the girls team for our school. Like, I have to call parents every beginning of season and be like, these are the reasons why your daughter should play, right? And it's frustrating, because exactly what you were saying, Yamile, is that we shouldn't be going through this anymore. Like, I shouldn't have to talk to dads and convince them that, like, they should let their daughters play. Like, the way I found that works is, like, it's a good way. It looks good on college applications. Like, that's how I've gotten tons of girls to be able to play now, because, like, these parents do want their kids to go to college and have opportunities, but you should just be able to play because you want to play.
Exactly. But there are still all those little misconceptions that you have to get through.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Yamile. We really, really appreciate it. We love the book. It was such a great experience reading it together. with these gentlemen. Gentlemen, do you have any final comments before we head out?
Well, I want to
Okay,
say
how about-
something before we
No,
go.
I thank you so much for your time. You answered all our questions. I think our next meeting will be very fun because of your information that you provided. Thank you
I
so much.
love
Can I
it.
say something? Can I say something?
Yes.
You inspire me for like how to see like how they treat the girls in a different like a different view, and like what's happening in the society with girls, and how they don't get to play.
Mhm. I'm so glad to hear that. That was my #1 goal, and I'm happy that my story resonated with you. Like I said, this is a dream come true. There's nothing better than to hear what a reader thought about something that came from my mind and my heart, you know. And I'm excited also to talk with a group that knows how much soccer means in your life, even if, you know, not everybody will go on and become a professional player, but the lessons that you learn in a team will stay with you forever. And it's a super amazing gift what you have to be in a team in which not only you're improving your soccer skills, but also your mind, your perception about, you know, the world. You're talking about important topics, because I think it was Guardiola who said that in Barcelona, they don't want to create amazing soccer players. They wanted to create amazing human beings. And the best soccer players are those who are a full person, that, you know, have that spirituality, that inner life, the intellect, that they become educated. And so I think you're all going on the right path, and I admire you so much. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today.
Can we all say thank you with our cameras on?
Thank
please?
you.
Thanks
Thank
so much.
you.
Yes.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Carina. Bye bye.
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 Nice
Did we
day.
leave as well?
Thank you.
We'll see some of you boys at practice.
See you at
Did we
practice,
leave as
boys.
well? Wait,
We got
wait,
practice tomorrow.
Yeah, we have practice